So this afternoon, we have a great panel. In June of 2023, the New Mexico workforce system embarked on a journey to develop the state's 2024 to 2027 Workforce Innovation Opportunity Act combined state plan. After a comprehensive participatory process, we developed a vision, goals, and strategies. The we includes WIOA core and combined partners, 6 of who are with us today joining us to discuss the journey to achieving the goals and strategies of the plan. In your folders, you have a copy of the executive summary and can view the full plan on our DWS website. Our goals are also listed on page 4 of the executive summary for reference. So with us today, we have the Adult Education Division of the New Mexico Higher Education Department. They administer WIOA Title II Adult Education and Literacy Programs as outlined by the Adult Education and Family Literacy Act. With us today, we have Director Dr. Amber Gallup. Next, we have the Division of Vocational Rehabilitation of the New Mexico Public Education Department and the New Mexico Commission for the Blind, who administers WIOA Title IV Vocational Rehabilitation Services for people with disabilities. We have today with us Director Casey Stone Romero and Director Greg Trapp. Next, we have the New Mexico Aging and Long-Term Services Department, who administers the Senior Community Service Employment Program authorized under Title V of the Older Americans Act of 1965. And with us, we have Bureau Chief Doug Calderwood of Employment Programs. Next, we have the Income Support Division of the New Mexico Health Care Authority, formerly New Mexico Human Services Department, who administers eligibility and benefits administration for temporary assistance to needy families and supplemental nutrition assistance program, and oversees the contracts for the TANF and SNAP employment and training programs. For the TANF, we have Roxanne Luna, who is the Bureau Chief of Work and Family Support Bureau. And with her, we have Annabelle Mendoza, who is the Deputy Bureau Chief of Work and Family Support Bureau. So again, thank you, and thank you to our panelists for being here today. We have a few questions to ask them, and so we'll go ahead and get started. Okay. So as I mentioned, the goals are on page 4 of the summary, but the first goal is to collaborate with employers to expand the workforce that supports the safety, health, and well-being of Mexican families and the modernization of New Mexico's infrastructure. On page 9, list our priority sectors. So our first sector is broadband expansion, construction industries, early childhood education and care, first responders, healthcare, including behavioral health, and natural resource management. So our first question, and I'll begin with Director Greg Trapp. How will your program collaborate across WIOA partners, workforce regions, education providers, and employers to develop comprehensive strategies for priority sectors?
So that's quite a question. I will do my best to answer that. And I think that as we look at this particular goal, for us, really the most critical thing is to make sure that our individuals, our consumers at the Commission for the Blind, are able to obtain employment that is consistent with their abilities And in doing so, we work with each individual, making sure that we are helping them to obtain employment that's consistent with their goals and their priorities. And that's what really drives how we work with the entities that we partner with. So depending upon what an individual's employment goal is, that will determine what entities we work to get them plugged in with, how effective we are in helping them to obtain their goal, and exactly where they're at in their education. We're working with different educational entities, different programs, different what we often call comparable benefits and services. So we've got a lot of people on our panel, so I'll keep my answer brief.
Thank you. Same question, Casey Stone Romero, Director.
Thank you, Veronica. To build on what Greg said, we are what's called the general VR agency, so we cover everything that Greg doesn't cover and sometimes share cases. In addition to providing services to individuals with disabilities, we provide that in-depth assessment to identify their employment outcomes based on their interests, skills, and abilities, and taking into account that barrier removal. We also work directly with employers to provide training and technical assistance on the ADA and tax credits, and to help them overcome some of the fear that comes with potentially hiring individuals with disabilities. And then finally, what we do is we work with students starting at age 14 with pre-employment transition services. We provide them 5 core services to help them jumpstart their skills as they start to transition out of high school and into the work world. So we try to make sure that those individuals are very prepared when they walk into their next phase of life. And then connection with resources and information is very important for us to make sure that people have the foundations that they need to maintain that employment.
Thank you. Same question. So same question for all panel members, okay? First one, all of them at the same time. All right, I'll go ahead and move on to Dr. Amber Gallup.
Okay. Well, anyone who knows adult education in New Mexico knows we've been making a really strong push in a number of fronts in the last few years. One of those fronts is internal, so we've been improving our outcomes. We've been increasing the quality of our services in different ways, and most importantly, the number of people that we serve. And in fact, I wanted to brag a little bit that, New Mexico, we have our most important outcome is called measurable skills gains, and it's a composite outcome of many different ways that we assess learning and improvement in students. And we've long been in the 4th quartile and nationally in New Mexico, and we just reached the 1st this month. So that's it. I'm excited about it as well. So that's an internal front. But on the external front, which is more the question that you're asking right now, we've been doing a push outward into our communities and to our workforce and other partners. And we're doing that in a few concrete ways. Number one, we've been working across agencies in the state. So not staying within the higher education department where we are, we've been building alliances in the Department of Workforce Solutions, Economic Development Department, MNERD, and and HCA and many other agencies as well, and trying to braid resources and funding. Everybody wants to do workforce development right now, and adult education can be a piece of all of those, right? In a state like New Mexico, we're also trying to have a more engaged presence on the local workforce board. So we would love opportunities to come and speak. We've got someone representing adult education on each of those boards, and we want to be much more of a vocal presence, much more of an engaged presence, and we see that as our responsibility. And so we really want to be advocating vocally for adult learners and their participation in workforce development a lot more than we have in the past. And I think that it's, and I always say these kinds of things with a preface to say that, I have so much respect for the people in our communities, their resourcefulness, their tenacity. So I hate throwing out these kinds of stats, and I like to preface it with that. It's not coming from a deficits perspective, but we are in a state that is ranked literally 50th in the nation for adult literacy. And we are 46th in the nation for achievement of high school diploma and high school equivalency combined. So we have a lot of work to do. I wake up every morning thinking about the fact that I'm the adult education director in the state with number 50 in adult literacy, and what can I do, right, to improve that. So I think, talking about partnerships, we just all need to work together, and we're trying to take some real concrete steps to developing those relationships and moving forward.
Thank you. Doug.
Thank you for this question, and I'm going to say that I loved what Greg and Casey said earlier, and that is the same approach that our program takes with older workers. It's very much individualized to the person, their employment goals. We try and help them overcome barriers and gain skills to move to what they want to do, where they want to be. But in that process, we do create a lot of partnerships, both with education organizations, with other support services that provide food supports, nutrition training, computers and computer skills. There are myriad things in the skills gaining area, and then of course the workforce and the employers that we must work with to find the job where the employer wants the person and the person wants the job. So those are the partners that sort of fit into the plan. Another thing that's going on in the state right now with our programs is that every 4 years, the U.S. Department of Labor reissues the contracts for CSEP for those nonprofit organizations in our state that provide this service. And so both National Indian Council on Aging and Goodwill have had to rebid for their contracts this year. And we'll know by the 1st of October if they'll continue to be our partners or if we have to develop new partnerships and move on. So that's a piece that's particular to our area.
Thank you, Doug. Annabelle.
Hello, today I'm going to speak on behalf of the SNAP Employment and Training Program. So this is a fairly new program. I mean, it's always been there. It is a federal requirement that this program does exist under the SNAP program. However, this is the first time that it actually has its own team dedicated to complete this type of work. And so with that, us being so new, we're working with trying to build partnerships and collaborations. We do have one provider right now who provides extensive case management to our SNAP ENT recipients or participants. However, we do want to expand those collaborations and partnerships. So we have met with the Department of Workforce Solutions for possible co-enrollments or ideas on how we can work together. We also have met with New Mexico Higher Education to see how we can also work together. The idea with that is that we want to help expand SNAP benefits to college students. So we want to help through partnering with colleges. We'd actually be able to allow, or it's kind of like it's an exemption, it's like a loophole you could say, to allow college students to actually be eligible to receive SNAP benefits. So that's another collaboration we're looking forward to complete, as well as we do have a federal requirement that we need to meet with the workforce development boards every so often to just make sure that our state plan, our annual state plan is aligned and that we are moving towards the right direction that we need to move forward, specific to the state of New Mexico.
Thank you. Hey, Roxanne.
Hi. So it's a privilege to represent TANF. We have a lot of combined partners here. I do sit on the Central Workforce Board, and so for us, the goal is to really determine where our TANF participants are and where do they want to be. And so for us, our whole strategic plan for this next year, and as well as the term of the WIOA Combined State Plan, is to really embark on what our partners have, what our community stakeholders offer, how can we match people to resources to help mitigate those barriers. As Amber said, if you guys really, really thought about the number of folks in our state who do not have a high school equivalency or diploma, your head would just pop. It's amazing to think the opportunity is there. So how do we encourage people to do that? And for us, it's just really building those robust partnerships. We do partner with DWS. ISD within our department does the eligibility, and then we refer them over to our partners over at the New Mexico Works program with DWS. And we work in tandem with them to develop a service delivery plan. And we do these assessments with our participants. And that's where we figure out where do they want to be. So we're in the passenger seat, helping them navigate their journey. And just really working hard with community stakeholders and partners and the workforce boards and the various sister agencies to really try to pump our time and effort into our friends and our neighbors. Because if you really think about it, TANF participants are your friends and neighbors. They're our citizens. I think that's my answer. I can go on and on, but I'm not.
So the next question is around goal number 2. And goal number 2 is to build and empower the workforce to thrive in the face of changes to the state and national economy and the way we work. So question number 1 is, how is your program planning on expanding the use of workforce preparation and pre-vocational paths to expand training on foundational skills? So I will start with Dr. Amber Gallup.
Okay, so in adult education, we're investing really heavily in the integrated education and training model. And a lot of you have already heard me talk about this, and my goal is by the end of this year, everybody will just know the definition, and I won't have to say it anymore. But basically, in a nutshell, integrated education and training is a model specific to adult education, where people are involved in adult education. They're doing their academic and adult literacy skills simultaneously with workforce preparation skills, and then simultaneously also with actual workforce training towards an industry recognized credential or stackable credentials or entry into a registered apprenticeship program. So I'm really excited about this model. The state has invested in this, particularly in the last couple of years. We're expanding it, and our enrollment this last year, FY24, fiscal year 24, we increased our enrollment 30% in IET programs across the state. New Mexicans earned 274 different credentials, and the number of IET programs increased by 55%. And we're thinking that this year we've added so many that we think that we're going to be able with 21 new types of credentials, and we have just approved 46 different IET programs across the state. So really, this is representing a big expansion in New Mexico of this model. And one thing I just want to emphasize, because this expansion has already started, and we're doing it in exciting areas. I mean, frontline healthcare, renewable energy, broadband expansion, as well as some of our other more traditional industries where we have strong IETs as well. But one thing I just want to say to here, because everybody is really excited about registered apprenticeship. And I just want to throw out there that the IET, the Integrated Education and Training Model, is a national model that meets the qualifications of a high quality pre-apprenticeship program as defined by the federal government. We can take an IET program, it already has all the components, and all we really need besides that is just connection to an employer that has a registered apprenticeship program. And if people complete that, that program, they can get preferential access into the registered apprenticeship program. The reason that's one of the reasons that's important is that pre-apprenticeship programs often serve groups of people, minoritized individuals, or non-traditional individuals for that field. So this is an exciting opportunity for us in New Mexico to say, hey, we would really like more Native American students or Native American adults in these programs. We would like more women in these programs, whatever, right? And more people who speak English as a second language in these programs or in these registered apprenticeship programs. And adult education can be a partner with any registered apprenticeship program to create that. So that's what I'm excited most about in these next few years of the state plan.
Thank you. Same question for Doug Calderwood.
Thank you. Our program, similar to what Amber just talked about, the senior employment programs work around an individual employment plan. And so what we do is place people in half-time minimum wage positions with either nonprofit or government agencies. So people in our program are receiving on-the-job experience while receiving training and support to overcome barriers. It all happens at the same time. They have up to 4 years in the program. So we have a pretty good success rate with that amount of time to work with people. And so I feel that in this area, we've been doing this work. We've been doing these pre-employment plans for as long as the program's been around. So I think we were kind of a pioneer in this area. The other piece that I wanted to emphasize, and it wasn't really emphasized as much as I think it could have been in the state plan, is that one of the big changes in the workforce is the aging of the workforce. And so that's another area that we are sort of ahead of the curve on, that we're working in that area and have been for as long as our program has existed. So I'll keep it to that. Thank you.
Doug. Okay, moving on to Casey.
Thank you, Veronica, that you surprised me. So I'm sitting next to Greg Trapp, and I'm actually going to quote Greg Trapp. He'll be happy to hear this, that individuals with disabilities are an untapped resource in our communities. We all know that. We all hear it. But one of the most amazing things about the VR program is that we work with them on an individualized basis to really look at their needs and see how they can succeed in the workplace. And we're not plug and play jobs. We're not just trying to find jobs for people. We're trying to find careers. And so when it comes to program planning, when it comes to expanding those vocational paths and empowerment, we're really looking at long-term what is going to help this person live their life, taking into account some of the things like how much their disability will cost them over a lifetime. And related to what Doug said, people are working longer. We have an aging workforce, which means that a lot of us will also be exposed to disability as we age. So if you're not a person with a disability, you know a person with a disability, it's very close to all of us. This is historically a population as well that has low wages or very entry-level jobs. However, they're very loyal to their employers, and it actually increases brand loyalty to employers when people with disabilities are employed. And so it's a cycle where we get employees who are really loyal. We can grow them in an entry-level position and move them up, because VR is not just here, for that entry-level position. We're also here to help them advance in that employment.
Greg, is there anything you want to add to that?
Certainly everything that Casey said, but if you're an individual who's blind or visually impaired, or if you go to bed tonight and you woke up tomorrow morning and had lost your vision during the night, all the things that you would need to be able to do to go to work, to get dressed, to cook your breakfast, to read the newspaper, to transport yourself to work, to travel from your car or destination, to be able to get into the office, to use the computer once you're in the office. All of those things you would not be able to do without specialized training. So we do that in really two different ways at the Commission for the Blind. We have what's called our Orientation Center in Alamogordo, which is a residential training program, typically a 6 to 9 month period where students go down there. We just recently added a new apartment facility there. That program is accredited by the Commission on Accreditation of Rehabilitation Facilities. In Albuquerque, we also have what's called our Skills Center. We're currently working with adult students there, helping them to acquire basic skills in blindness, cooking, technology, orientation, mobility, those kinds of things. And to go on with what Doug said, for the aging workforce, we also have an association between aging and visual impairment. So as the workforce ages, we also see more people coming into our program who have visual impairments. Thank you.
Okay, moving on to goal number 3. Goal number 3 is to increase year-over-year labor force participation rates and economic prosperity for disengaged and difficult to reach New Mexicans. So the question is, how will your programs work towards streamlining and improving delivery of wraparound services to at-risk youth, criminal justice involved individuals, Native American communities, people with disabilities, rural New Mexicans, English language learners, veterans, women who have left the workforce, and individuals receiving unemployment, basically everyone we serve. So, how will your program work towards streamlining and improving delivery of wraparound services? I will start with Roxanne.
So the TANF program is dedicated to pretty much the comprehensive wraparound delivery of services. Our people have barriers. There's a reason why they're not engaged in the workforce. Our mission and our goal is to implement the whole family approach. So you can't have a parent who's ready to join the workforce if they have kiddos who have situations. You have a truant child. You have an at-risk youth. You have a sick youth. You have childcare, language barriers. There's just multiple barriers out there. So our idea is to create a holistic and effective support system for our folks that we serve every day, utilizing our partnerships throughout the community, ensuring that every individual has the access that they need to these necessary resources so they can achieve that mission and goal of self-sufficiency, and to help provide a quality of life that they and their children deserve. COVID really challenged us to think outside the box, right? The population we serve is different. Society's different. I say this all the time. The way that we address people and how we work to better them has to be different. Our partners with DWS are working on their aligned case management approach. We are working really, really hard to educate our staff on the resources that are available. Really working with our participants to educate them on what's available, because word travels. If you have a good experience somewhere, you're going to tell your friends and neighbors about it, right? One thing to really think about is just the various programs that we offer. The We Owe a Youth. I know that DWS has the youth exploratory options for career design. I'm trying to think what else. We do have a tribal liaison within Healthcare Authority, and her name is Shelly Begay. Shelly's been instrumental with getting us out there to meet our tribal partners where they're at and really just get the word out about what we are, what we have to offer, and how we can deliver as a partnership. And again, I can go on, but I know we're time sensitive, so I'm going to pass it off to my friend Annabelle here.
So our current provider does provide, like I said, extensive case management and wraparound services. We also included the whole family approach model incorporated it into our SNAP employment and training case management style. So we also provide services to the entire family. We don't just focus on the individual who we receive the referral for. And so what we're working on is, by the way, the providers do provide services statewide. They currently have 6 career navigators, but they travel, they meet people where they need to meet them to provide these services. And I do want to say that we've had our own barriers with like system enhancements, which does affect, how we can improve our services and deliver them to our participants. But we're working on improving that. Of course, that's all tied into funding and other issues. But we do have a plan and we have a vision that we want to, again, help expand SNAP benefits to college students. And we also attend a lot of outreach events in rural areas, because we are trying to build a tribal partnership so that we can provide employment and training services and support services in those areas. I think that's all I have.
Okay, thank you. There's a second question that relates to goal number 3, and that is, how will your programs expand opportunities for English language learners, particularly in the border regions? And obviously this question goes to Director Amber Gallup.
Okay, so yeah, we owe us federal funding, as we know, and so we have in Title II a kind of unusual distinction as being a title that can serve adult English language learners, we call them ELLs, English language learners, regardless of their documentation status. As long as they're residents of residents of New Mexico, we may serve them, and we do. About a little less than half of our students every year are adult English language learners. We provide English as a second language and other services. And that percentage has also been growing every year. I think we've right now between 4,000 and 5,000 people that we serve that are adult English language learners. And with our ESL programs, and more are growing, we're adding new ESL programs all the time. So we're doing that in that way. I think I also want to just mention that, one thing we've noticed is that IETs, this workforce development model that I've mentioned, we haven't historically been serving many adult English language learners with that model. And that's a problem that we've noticed. And we've started having some conversations in the community with Somos Un Pueblo Unido and other organizations. And in our English, our ESL students in our programs, kind of why that is. And what we've learned is that we sometimes, not willingly, not intentionally, but almost paternalistically decide that, well, because citizenship is a requirement for this credential or for this position, then they should not be in this program. But what Somos Un Pueblo Unido and other programs and other students have helped us understand is that, documentation citizenship is a process. Work authorization is a process. And there are a lot of mixed status families. And it could be that some people in a family can take advantage of some of the services or, can access employment or certification, and some cannot. It really varies from certification to certification and employer to employer. So status is a process. There are mixed status families. And most importantly, adult English language learners know what they need. They know what their options are. Our responsibility is to be upfront about what the requirements of the job are and the requirements of the training program, and then step back and let people decide if this is something they want to participate in. So this is a fundamental shift for us of trying to make these programs more accessible actively for adult English language learners. And, I think that I'm excited about being able to serve our really vibrant immigrant community in New Mexico more this coming year.
So third question for goal 3. How does your program plan to educate employers on expanding their conventional recruiting pools to include marginalized groups through skill-based and other inclusive employment practices? So I will start with Casey.
Thank you, Veronica. So at the very basic level, when an employer comes to us, what we offer is a vetted pool of candidates. We know these people really well. We know what their skills, interests, barriers are, and we can work with the employer to help support them into the workforce. On-the-job training opportunities are also something that we support so that an employer can try an employee and an employee can try an employer and make sure that it's a good job match. Most recently, we brought together a team of what we call business outreach coordinators, and their job is to work specifically with employers and understand the needs of those employers and how to help them increase that pool of candidates. And then simple things like assistive technology, training for businesses on disability awareness or etiquette, and then, of course, supporting our individuals with disabilities to meet their work demands.
Thank you. Greg.
All right. So, of course, everything Casey said. But we are in the process of hiring our own business outreach coordinator, and I'm thinking how many people in this room would be wonderful at that position. So if you're interested, speak to Jim Solis. Jim, raise your hand there, and we'd be glad to hire you because that position is open. One of the things that we, of course, do is to help businesses retain employees. And oftentimes that's at the very highest level. So we, every once in a while, will get a closure at a couple $100,000 for their wage because we've had a CEO who's lost vision, but they recognize what a valuable employee that individual is, and they come to us and we work with that employer. That'll happen at all different levels of a business. Wherever level that employee might be, we'll work to provide the technology that they need, the training, help them to retain that employment.
Thank you. Doug, would you like to add anything to that?
Yes, thank you. So we're in, once again, a slightly different position because our sector of the workforce, older workers, is the one sector whose participation rate is already increasing. And that's not through any work we're doing. That's because all of us are getting older. And so as that fact of life sinks into the workforce, it is just happening that workforce employers have more older workers. They already do. And so part of what we can do is help workforces think through that, to think what that means, to think about possibly instituting some more part-time jobs, some more flexible jobs, some possible ways to decrease the physical level of activity that's necessary for a job, just ways to acknowledge that the workforce is getting older and to respond to that with thought and with care, while retaining the ability to do your work and to grow your business. There was an interesting statistic in our session earlier today from Paula Getz, who works with New Mexico New, where she presented a statistic that work employers who hire 10% of their workforce as older workers see more than 10% increase in their output. So older workers are not the liability that many employers believe they are, and I think people are beginning to realize that. As far as working with our clients, we are placing them with employers. They work half-time at minimum wage for up to 4 years with an employer. So by the end of that time, they're well known to the employer, they know the employer well, and many times that becomes an ongoing employment. So that's I think what I have to add. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to wrap up this session with the last question, and then that's, excuse me, goal number 4 is to attract out-of-state workers to New Mexico and improve retention of New Mexicans within the state, particularly in our rural communities. So I will ask the same question to all 6 of our panel members. There are 4 strategies tied to this goal, and you will find those strategies in the executive summary that you have. So based on those 4 strategies tied to this goal, what types of challenges do you think your programs will be faced with in trying to attract people to the rural parts of the state where both workforce and training needs are particularly challenging? And how do you plan to overcome those challenges? And I will start at this end. Roxanne.
So within I want to say human services, I'm sorry, we just changed our name and I've been there 20 years, so this is really hard for me to absorb, and I promise I'll get it. But within HCA, we're not so much in the business of attracting out-of-state workers, we're more so investing in making sure that there's access to the programs that we offer to the citizens. We want to make sure that all eligible New Mexicans can receive those benefits and those extensive supports that help them in their self-sufficiency journey. Our goal is to develop effective processes. We want to make sure that they can maintain their benefits, that they're getting those resources, that we're reaching them where they're at, whether that's not just physically going to where they're at, but being where they're at, being in their community. As Annabelle mentioned, we do a lot of community outreach. We aim to improve the accessibility of our benefits. We want to help enhance the economic development. How can we feed into that infrastructure and match our individuals to training? How do we promote rural living benefits while still building those strong partnerships within the communities to attract and retain those workers? But ultimately our goal here is we want to make sure that we find new ways to reach and engage with individuals in these rural populations, because being in those rural communities is already a barrier for them. We shouldn't be making things harder. We should be matching them to access, or meeting them where they're at, providing them with access to those resources, and just mitigating those barriers so they can succeed.
Thank you.
So like Roxanne said, we're wanting everything she said, but I do want to add, like she said, we know there's barriers in these rural communities. We have great communication with our provider. Our CDSs are giving us lots of information, things that their participants are letting them know that are barriers that maybe we didn't know that are new to us, or we've always known, just didn't know how to approach the situation, how to address the barriers. Some of those barriers are, of course, broadband, laptops, transportation, childcare. There's many, many more. But what we want to do with the SNAP Employment and Training Program is we want to expand collaborations and partnerships. Again, that is key to growing this program and being able to provide these support services to other individuals in the community. We want to align. We understand that support services are going to be very different in an urban area than a rural area, right? So we want to make sure that our support services are aligned based on the community needs. So again, we're trying very hard. We've been trying for almost a year and a half to create a partnership with a tribal partner, so that we can start exploring, with that and seeing what we need to do to accomplish this and move forward, and maybe serve as an example for other states, at least within our region, that currently do not have any tribal partnerships. With that, again, we do a lot of outreach. We have been in contact with Taos, Laguna Pueblo. Funding is a big issue. It is important that for individuals to be able, or agencies to be able to partner with SNAP Employment and Training, they do need to have funds that are not federal funds in order to utilize our 50-50 model. And so reimbursement model. So I think that those are some of the challenges that we currently face. But again, with our provider that we have, and having these coordinators or navigators are able to travel statewide to try to provide these services, or they're getting very creative with where they meet them and how they provide them these services, so that people have what they need out there in our communities.
Thank you. So although Roxanne said that they're not particularly trying to bring in, others into New Mexico, but I definitely hear that they're trying to help keep New Mexicans
Trying
in.
to build
Yes.
the workforce.
All right, moving on to Doug.
Thanks. I'll try and keep this really brief. This goal is about attracting out-of-state workers. And one thing about New Mexico that is true is that by 2030, so in 6 years, we will be the fourth, well, depending on the statistic you look at, third, fourth, or fifth in the nation in our percentage of older people. Now, as people retire, it's interesting how the perspective of work shifts. Those who are approaching retirement, 51% said the reason to work in retirement would be money. Of those who are retired, 62% say the reason to work is because they want to stay engaged mentally, physically, and socially. And so I think with the growth of older people in New Mexico that's already projected to happen and is happening, that as those retirees and others who grow into age within New Mexico and come into New Mexico to retire, many of them will turn to employment, sometimes to their own surprise, and that will grow the older worker section of our economy.
Thank you, Doug. Amber.
Okay, so just briefly, a problem that we have in New Mexico adult education, and my division oversees three different systems: the adult education system, the adult literacy system, which is separate, and then the high school equivalency system, which is also separate. And one thing we've noticed is that we have a lot of what we're calling literacy deserts, or adult literacy deserts in New Mexico, meaning that we have large swaths of the rural parts of the state that don't have any adult education or adult literacy program accessible, and that's a really big problem. And we did our own study. There's a lot of national statistics available on this point, but we did our own study, and county by county in New Mexico, and found that adult literacy levels are correlating very strongly with children's literacy levels and educational outcomes. To the extent that we can get more services, more adult education, adult literacy, and workforce development services to the rural areas, we can make a measurable difference in our outcomes for our children as well. which is also an area where we need to improve in New Mexico. So I think for us, we're really looking at how can we serve these areas better. We're going to be going to the legislature this year. HED is going to go to the legislature, and they're going to make their case for how we would like to have additional funding to serve these populations, in particular in these areas. We have a big competition, so under WIOA, we've got these big federal competitions. So that's adult education's doing that this year. So we're hoping if we can get more funding, then we can get in more programs in these rural areas. Same for adult literacy. If we can get more funding for adult literacy, we'll fund more programs. And that's our main way that we're hoping to be able to address this in the short term, and then kind of go from there. We're also kind of hoping, two things really quickly. We're hoping to make some of our IET elements online as we get them more developed, so we'll be able to access some people in more rural areas. And then finally, there's a big digital equity grant application out there, a federal grant, and we're going for it in adult education with a big group of partners. And with that, if we get that, we'll be able to get infrastructure, like technology for people, computers, access, hotspots, et cetera, training for people, and also just general access. So that's an exciting new direction for us.
Good luck.
Thanks.
Greg.
All right, so this is a tough one. One of the things that we do is to work very closely with the Native American vocational rehabilitation programs, what we call the 121 projects, such as Laguna Yakima, Jemez, the Navajo Nation VR program. But in terms of the population, when you look at people in rural New Mexico, I really look at it in three different groups. You have individuals who actually move from the rural areas to the urban areas for two reasons. One, they have better transportation services, which is very important for people with blindness and low vision. Two, medical services. So we have to really work to address those issues. But we also see individuals in rural parts of the state who move there because oftentimes the cost of living is less. So, and sometimes those individuals are content to remain on Social Security benefits. They don't want to work. Well, we need to work with those individuals to help them to understand that it is possible to work. We have a contract with New Mexico Legal Aid where we assist our consumers who encounter difficulties with their benefits, help them with work incentives. So that's part of our assuring them that it will be safe to work, that we will kind of take their hand and walk them through the process. We also see individuals, often family members or others, who live in rural parts of the state who lack access to transportation. So we work with those individuals on other ways to become employed. I think that the opening up of remote work is going to be very, very important. So we're looking at how we can provide technology support to address those kinds of opportunities that will open out there as a result of remote work, which will really help, I think, people living in the rural parts of the state.
Thank you.
In addition to what Greg said, as the larger of the two VR programs in the state, we do have 24 offices statewide. So we are in the rural communities, which doesn't mean that we cover everything. We have a lot of staff that travel multiple hours to get to students or get to participants to serve them where they are. One thing that came to mind when I was looking at this question is the concept of community mapping, looking at that community and seeing what resources are there, what jobs are available, and assessing that first when you look at the person to see, can they continue to remain in that community when it comes to providers, medical providers, jobs, things like that. We do also assist with transportation resources and relocation costs if there is not something that works in that community for the individual. And then VR is a national program. So if we have someone who's transferring, from Texas to New Mexico, it's very easy for us to make that handoff. One of the great things in New Mexico is we're one of the few, well, I guess there's a lot more states now, but we do not have a wait list for services, so we can pretty easily transition people into services in New Mexico.
Thank you, Casey. So on page 15 of the executive summary, we talk about the 4 strategies tied to this goal. And I just want to mention that in that discussion that we had as we were working together to create this plan, we talked about attracting out-of-state talent and boomerangs, meaning New Mexicans returning to the state. And we are definitely going to be working with our state chambers of commerce, our Department of Economic Development on out-of-state recruitment initiatives, also with our partner agency, New Mexico Tourism Department. So there are a lot of opportunities for us to identify how to not only bring New Mexicans back to our state, particularly my son who's in Colorado, we got to bring him back. And how we're gonna, not let our children and family members leave New Mexico. So please join me in another round of applause to our 6 panel members.